Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney and MS Now legal analyst Joyce Vance, senior writer at The Dispatch and MS Now contributor David Drucker, Punchbowl News co-founder and MS Now political contributor Jake Sherman, and former California Senator Barbara Boxer still with us. A great group. My thanks to all of you. Jake, we'll start with you. I'm sure Leader Thune was thrilled, downright ecstatic to get these marching orders from President Trump. You know the Senate better than just about anybody. Talk to us about just where the vote count would stand if this were to happen, and what happens next. Is Thune going to listen to the president?
No, he's not going to listen to the president. We could end the conversation. Great being here. No, I'm kidding. Listen, the reality is that the SAVE Act does not have the votes right now. In either format, right? So the number one, there's three formats this could go, right? They could try to pass it through regular order. Democrats would filibuster it. It wouldn't get 60 and it would die. They could try to break the filibuster, which means they would need 51 votes to break the filibuster. That's not going to happen. They don't have the votes to do that. They could put it on the budget resolution in reconciliation, which is not a guaranteed way to get it through. They could try to slam it through that way. They don't have the votes right now for the budget resolution because that budget resolution is objectionable to Republicans in a whole host of ways, either whether it's the number for the military that doesn't have enough military spend for some people. It has too much money for other people. People don't want to go through what we call on Capitol Hill a vote-a-rama, in which senators stay up all night voting on pretty much unlimited amendments on a budget resolution that Democrats will make very political painful for Republicans. They don't want to go through that so close to an election. So staying in session for August is not really going to do anything besides piss people off, John. It's not going to yield a result. It's not going to get people who are against the SAVE Act to vote for the SAVE Act. Now, do I think, broadly speaking, that there is a path for elements of the SAVE Act? Yes, I do. I do think that there is a pathway for a voter ID bill, perhaps a citizenship check bill, and perhaps even through a budget resolution at some point this Congress. I do not think that point will be during this August recess.
Yeah, and look, polls do suggest that Americans largely do think there should be some sort of ID check when it comes to voting, but these will be much smaller measures than what Trump is looking for. David Drucker, Jake just made clear that the Senate wouldn't be thrilled to have to stay in town in August, in part because what does that prevent them from doing? Well, it prevents them from going home and actually campaigning, and some of them have really tough re-election fights.
Yeah, I'm sure Susan Collins from Maine would be thrilled. I'm sure Dan Sullivan from Alaska would be thrilled, and so on down the line. Look, the thing about this is that voters support all sorts of things if you ask them. And it's true, they do support largely the idea of showing your ID in order to vote. People are so used to showing their ID to, get on an airplane, open up their utilities when they move into a new apartment or buy a new home. But is this their big priority? And politically, this is not their big priority. Their big priority is the economy and affordability. I feel like I'm a broken record here. But every day that the president spends on something that voters aren't demanding that he do is a day that Democrats are, jumping for joy because it allows them to own that space. I also want to, point one thing out. If Republicans decide to move elements of the SAVE Act that voters broadly support within reconciliation, that will open the door for Democrats to move elements of, for instance, that H.R. 1 elections bill that they tried to do at the beginning of the Biden administration that was stopped by Manchin and Sinema, right? Like any new steps that Republicans take with a policy that they move through the reconciliation, which is how you skirt the filibuster, Democrats will just take that cue and we'll ping pong this back and forth. So if the president was really that concerned about mail-in voting, which I think is simply his way of trying to prove that the 2020 election was stolen, I think he'd allow the red states and others that have minimal mail-in balloting to continue to do their thing. And he'd allow the states that want to do mail-in balloting to do their thing. And he'd let people judge where things fall. But he's obsessed with this, and it's to the detriment of his party as we approach the midterm elections.
So, Senator Boxer, you obviously are deeply familiar with the workings of the upper chamber. Put yourself, if you will, into the shoes of your Republican colleagues, those who are there now, being asked, yes, to stay, maybe that happens, but just to simply continue to grapple with this when there isn't support, when Thune says he won't blow up the filibuster, and they have to associate themselves with legislation that, per polling, is deeply unpopular, and they're doing so just a few months before voters go to the polls.
Listen, I think it's a disaster for any Republican to be stuck there in Washington while there's lots of things going on in their states, and they're really hanging by a thread in this election year. But I do want to put an end to something. The Save America Act is not voter ID. It is really not. If it's just a question of showing, your license or another ID, a student ID, I don't think you'd see this uproar. But if you're in the Senate and you're stuck there, let me tell you what I would do. I would take to the floor. I would hold it for an hour. And this is what I would say. But I'll do it in 1 minute. Don't worry. I would say, look, this is going after democracy. This is voter suppression. For example, let's be specific. If you're a married woman like I am, and I had a different birth certificate name than I have now, okay? Boxer was not the name on my birth certificate. I'm in trouble. I have to go through all kinds of, what do I have to do? Show my marriage certificate? What if I got divorced and I got yet another name? Do I have to do? This is what it's about. Trump wants to take away our freedom, our democracy, our vote. And he's starting with going after women, going after students, going after people of color. And this is what the Save America Act is about. It's not the Save America Act. It's the Wreck America Act.
Jake, you wanted to jump in real quick.
Yeah, just to be, I agree with Senator Boxer on that the Save America Act as filed is much more than voter ID. It's citizenship check. It's a whole host of things. What Trump has done in recent days, though, has basically said pass elements of the Save America Act, because the Save America Act in total does not have anywhere remotely close to the votes. So I think from the White House, what they've said, and you take it for what it's worth with a grain of salt, that they would be happy with citizenship check, voter ID, with some workarounds for the very, very important concerns that Senator Boxer brings up, that people change their name, they get married, they get divorced, their birth certificate does not reflect who they are today, it doesn't reflect the name that they have today. But basically, they want anything to try to enact some of these policies into place. And by the way, John, it's important to note, the House budget resolution assumes $10 billion for this policy. It's a big chunk of change to incentivize states, to help states get around some of these hurdles that they would be putting in the way to voting.
And of course, this possible piece of legislation is just a piece of Trump's push right now with elections. We had that primetime speech he gave 2 weeks back in which he made yet again unfounded claims of voter fraud. And Joyce Vance, he's also now, his administration's asking the Supreme Court to revisit the executive order that would curtail mail-in balloting. Give us your read about the likelihood of that. What would it mean?
So it's interesting. It's a timing game. It involves whether or not the administration has taken enough steps towards implementing these policies for the courts to step in. So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this issue. This appeal that has gone to the Supreme Court will come off of the shadow docket, which means for our purposes, John, that it won't be a merits decision on the merits of the case. It'll just be a procedural decision about whether the government can go forward at this point in time. And to the really excellent point that Jake is making about the administration being willing to take more moderate steps to curtail the right to vote, the context really matters here, because there's a flip side to the fraud coin. And when you have these largely fake allegations of voter fraud, as you pointed out in your opening, something like 4 votes out of 10 million, well, the other side of that coin is voter suppression. That's the people that Senator Boxer is talking about who don't get to vote because of overtly restrictive measures. And so the real risk on this appeal is that the administration imposes restrictive steps so close to the election that it becomes difficult for the courts to successfully intervene.
So, David Drucker, you're out on the road. literally in this case. Is this what Republicans want to be talking about?
No, it's not. But the guy with the biggest bully pulpit, it's his obsession, right? It's what he cares about the most. And everywhere I go, I talk to voters. It's all about gas prices and grocery prices and feeling stretched. And we're not just talking voters at the lower ends of the economic ladder. We're talking people in the middle who feel like they are earning enough such that they shouldn't feel stretched. And this is true even of supporters of President Trump, right? When I talk to Republican voters who don't have a big issue with Trump, that's their biggest concern. There isn't a deep concern about really when you look at voters broadly. And I understand that there are lots of different kinds of voters, Jonathan, but I just want to be clear about this. I don't talk to lots of voters who are interested in Congress doing something about the state of our democracy or about, voter fraud, right? What they want is a better quality of life, and they want Congress to tackle those problems. So even though there are those concerns, and when I talk to voters, they have those concerns, their number one concern is all about the economy and their daily lives. And every day that the Republicans aren't using their biggest megaphone to address that and tell voters that they're working on it is not a good day for their campaigns.